Hi, this is Soul Life Loving. I'm Colette, and we're going to carry on a journey from, I was talking about telepathy, song connections, music connections, which now that I'm on following people on YouTube, it's a known way of communicating. But at that time, when I was little, it wasn't a known way of communicating. And because I was muting between, and I wasn't mute, it wasn't that I didn't want to talk to them. I was just okay where I was. I was just one of those children where until they need to change something for themselves, for their own progress, they don't. For example, I didn't realise that I wasn't walking fast enough for my mother to brag about. And I was a bottom walker where I had one leg crossed underneath the other, like a figure four, which I still sleep like that. I'm still on a figure four. And I would just drag myself around. So my underleg, all the way from my bum to my ankle, all the way down that was a callus, as I dragged myself over everything. And she took me to the park that was near my auntie's, and it was two-tiered, and it had a slope, like a tarmac slope running from the bottom playground, where it was for the kiddies, to the upper playground where there were better things, bigger, more dangerous things that we used to have in playgrounds when I was young. And the only reason why I was going to drag myself up there was because the swings were up there, and I love the swings. I'm still on the swings, and I remember getting to the bottom of this ramp, and they were in the top corner of the swings, and I just could not drag myself up this tarmac slope anymore. So I just got up and staggered up this slope and headed for the swings, because they were quite low in those days, and they had long chains. They didn't have EU regulation chains then. You could have low seats for the smaller children that could actually fit on the swing, and long chains. I love them. Oh, I love them. My God, I could get them high. And as I staggered off up this slope, I could hear my mother screaming, and I was just thinking, I'm just going to ignore her and pretend I can't hear her, and because she might stop me going onto the swings and get thee behind me. I'm going to the swings, so off I toddled. And it wasn't until later, when she was telling my dad what had happened, and I was listening in, because they thought, if she's mute, she can't hear you properly, and she can't understand the language properly. Whereas I did understand the language by then. By the time I was 3, I totally understood what they were all going on about. I was still, but they were like peripheral players in my world, my mum, my dad and my brother. Whereas my guide, he was my real dad. God, there's a pigeon just landed on the roof. It sounded like never mind. So I didn't need them. I mean, they fed me and they clothed me, and I tried to keep out of the way as much as possible, because my mother didn't like my telepathy. And it was really embarrassing for her, because I would speak her thoughts, because I couldn't tell the difference between them speaking and me hearing the speech and in my head. And I sometimes didn't know what they were meaning, because a lot of it was mill dialect. And a lot of the women were deaf from being in the weaving mills, so they had their own sign language they called it Mimo. but I could hear their thoughts, because their thoughts were different than their verbal language, and I'd just repeat it, which got me slapped. Which ended up, you know, that I used to hide under my mother's voluminous skirts, up against her pink flannelette bloomers, which they had then, and hide out the way in the hope that if I did say something, that it would be muffled up my mother's backside and they wouldn't hear me, so I wouldn't get slapped. But my mother was like, oh, you know, I must have been just as, what is she doing? She just doesn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be seen. Being seen meant trouble for me as a child. Being seen meant somebody tried to talk to me, or somebody tried to behave like, get me to behave like a normal child, and if they couldn't, then it would be my fault that they couldn't do that and there was something wrong with me. And I felt perfectly fine in myself. They could just feed me and look after me and just leave me alone. Thank you. Would have been fine. But after a particularly nasty clobbering, which I remember sitting on the seat, my mum was there and my brother was there, and he'd done something. And I don't know what he'd done, but he'd done something. And I was sat on the seat and I was swinging my legs because they weren't long enough to reach the first bar on the chair. And she said to him, Stephen, did you do blah, blah, blah? And he said, no, it were her. And she said, did you do that? And I said, no, it was Stephen. Stephen did it. I did not do it. I did speak. When I was called to, when I got to the point where I was so shocked at their lying and the way that they behaved together, that I felt obliged to defend myself. Bloody pointless. But I saw him smirk at me, and I saw her look at him, and she had a choice of which child to hit, because she knew I hadn't done it. She knew I hadn't done it. She knew by his smirk that he'd done it, but she wasn't going to hit her favourite child, so she clobbered me. And I just remember looking at her and saying, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter what I do. You're always going to take his side. This is so pointless. To which I can remember mother looking at me like, because it wasn't me speaking. That was my guide speaking. I think it must have astonished her. Anyway, it made her feel better about labelling me devil child, because how could I speak like that from nothing? You know, obviously if you don't speak and then you start speaking, you're going to still be in ugh world, but I wasn't. It must have really annoyed her that I was a lot more advanced than my brother, because I wasn't as handicapped as my brother, and I was a clever clogs, but I came with a mission. You get special gifts when you come with a mission. Not my fault. 3-year-old. I sort of had enough, so I stormed off upstairs, got my suitcase, packed my stuff, got my teddy, and I said, right, I'm going. I don't want to live with you. You're not nice. I'm going to go and get a cab to London, and I'm going to get a job, and then I don't have to live with you. I don't like you. So off I went. My mother stood at the doorway, watched me all the way down, went down to the offices at the bottom and said, can somebody give me a lift to London so I can get a job? I don't want to live with her. She doesn't like me. She's always hurting me. She's always siding with my brother. She's just for my brother and not me, and I'm always getting hit, and I don't like her. Take me to London and I'll get a job and I'll be fine. At which they all fell around laughing, in hindsight. In hindsight, it was funny, but at the time, I was fuming. Why can't they take me down to London? I can get a job, you know, because I'm not attached to this human body. I came with this mission, and it's like I'm having to drag this body about with me that wasn't competent enough. Anyway, nobody would give me a lift. So I stormed back up there. I was fuming. And I thought, right, I'm going to stay here until I'm 15 and then I'm going. So barged in, mother, smirking away. Wouldn't they take you? And I was like, no, but I'll stay here until I'm 15, and then when I get to 15, I'm going to leave and I won't be back. And it was just that, yeah, right, kind of thing. But in my head, what I know now is a manifestation set by an intention. That was my intention. So from 3 to, well, it was 2 days before I was 15, I couldn't wait. I'd managed to find somewhere, another home that I could go and live in away from it. And I did. But up to that point, I was gone. Now, in hindsight, well, it's not my hindsight, forward learning of human beings, which have discovered that there's a spectrum that people fall on, and that this spectrum is not an identification of a subnormal human being. They're just different. They have different skill sets. There's a huge group of people who have grown up being completely not the norm. And when I look back at what the norm was set then, it was just appalling. It was so narrow and so boring and so uninvolved that I can't, nowadays, that doesn't happen. I'm sure it does, but not in the kind of huge amounts. You're not, somebody will make an effort to identify which bracket you fall in and adjust accordingly, but then days didn't have brackets. And so that's why it was like it was. So it was just like multiple beatings. Everybody talking about you when you're out with your parents in a negative way. So all you get from everybody is negativity coming back. And for me, because I could see their energy, when I would look at them, I could see that their energy was dark. And I knew that they liked to hurt one way or another. And it didn't matter that they were smiling and all jovial. I could see their energy colours. And if they had a lot of dark energy inside them, even it was in patches, it was like smoke and it moved around depending on how much energy they put into that, but it was in them. And I knew, don't go near them, don't go near them, don't go near them. But sometimes you can't avoid them, dark energy people. And on that note, on 1414, I'm going to go. Thank you for listening.